Robert, when we spoke for the first film, we talked about that feeling of going back to the places from your youth, as well as how your cinematic work tends to focus on the hand in glove relationship between past and present. Eric, I'd love to know your perspective on this. So, big question regarding these films as themes about looking into the rear view, self-healing, and the places that made us into who we are, as well as the quest for truth, what would you say has been the most significant change or realization you've had as a result of doing these films from the first day of shooting on the first film to the last day of production on Force of Nature?
I'm not sure actually. I guess I can only think about that in a sense of, like Rob and I working together. Like we sort of we've shared an office for a long time, and making these films has kind of felt like a kind of culmination of all those years spent together trying to find something to work together on. So I guess in terms of like thinking about time past and time present, it always felt like, oh, this is a really nice kind of kind of culmination of many years spent together talking about things, and now we're finally getting to do things. And then suddenly it was like not one thing, not two things, but like three things, like within succession. So it's probably not a direct answer to your question, but it's the only way I can sort of relate to it. That sort of passing of time and thinking about, what you invest your time in, and how that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
May I ask you about the feeling you may have had when you've revisited some of the places that have made you into who you are?
Um, yeah, I mean, I it's don't know how to answer that. I guess yeah, everything you do is sort of accumulates, and I think it has a cumulative effect, whether you get sort of burnt out or whether you get refreshed from something. I've always sort of felt very refreshed from work. I take big breaks in between, and so when I when I look back, it's all vast majority, really positive memories and experiences, I guess.
Mhm. To dig a little more into that, are either one of you as reflective as Aaron Falk is? Like, are you often surprised by how memories of your youth pop up as an emotional or a mental tool to navigate what you've been going through, whether that's personal or creative?
Yeah, particularly with this film, Force of Nature. I grew up in the Blue Mountains, which is a few hours west of Sydney, and my father took me into the bush as a little kid, my brother and I, and taught us how to inhabit that world. And that was the greatest, strongest memories of my childhood were those experiences. So in some ways, the very personal nature of that informed the flashbacks in Force of Nature, which explore this young boy and his parents going out into the bush, right down to the fact that I rang my father and got him to find old maps and things from that era. And we reproduced those in the films. So even in Force of Nature, that's a very direct personal connection for me. The events that happen in there are very different. That never happened as it happens in the film. It's not a documentary.
Right.
But I think there is a sense of the film being, for me, a little bit of a love letter to that childhood and the Australian bush, the incredible landscape that is the Australian bush.
I don't mean to be digging into your lives. I'm just genuinely fascinated by these films as ideas about what happened to us and what's still happening to us. I think it's a very poetic perspective that stops you in your tracks a bit. So, speaking of poetry, I love how this film introduces Aaron Falk. Like he's surrounded by the very thing that was needed in the first film during his introduction, which is water. Like he's swimming in a pool. And it's a very minor beat that doesn't call attention to itself, but I clocked it and I said, oh, that's really cool. So, Robert, I feel like you're so gifted at finding these profound moments, no matter how small their existence is within the frame, whether it's the sound of a dog barking or to send the viewer's mind running, or the fact that just like the first film, the landscape serves as a metaphor with the slippery slopes or the labyrinth-like nature of the trees. I know you have Jane Harper's book to go off of, but I imagine so much of it because it's a whole new medium, it requires you to plug into your own poetry as a creative to hammer these themes home. So where do you think your poetic way of thinking most stem from?
I think landscape it would be the engine room of that for me in the films I've made. Taking the audience to places and the actors into places that the audience can journey to as well. I definitely like the power of imagery, as you said, like in the first film, there's pretty much no water in that film, in contemporary part until Genevieve O'Reilly's character turns up with a jug of fresh water at a key, like it was very precise how we used water. And it was very deliberate that the first image would be, as you've mentioned, would be fork, in the water, and that it would kind of let you know that you're in a new world. But even that, I guess, feeds into landscape, the idea of landscape. Like there were no rain machines in this film. That's all real rain. And it was wet and it was winter and there was a waterfall. And so I think the imagery you're talking about just comes out of place, a sense of place. So you go there and then the imagery becomes very, very apparent.
I feel like there's such a seamless flow among the events of the case itself, those trying to solve the case, and the personal memories of the person trying to solve the case. So, Robert, I would love to know more about the art of balancing those narratives on the same plane without jolting the audience out of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge. I work with a really good editing team, and um, I've always found calibrating the difference between a film like this being cryptic or confusing is really hard. Audiences like films that are cryptic because they're a puzzle to unlock, but if they're confusing, it's very frustrating for an audience. So I think one of the trickiest journeys of both this film and the dry and the edit was trying to make sure that they're a puzzle to unlock. So the past and the present and the various elements are fun to unlock rather than confusing. So we took a lot of time. They're both very long edits, very forensic edits, trying to work it out and testing it and showing it to people. And
So the edits themselves are like a puzzle, aren't they? It's like, I feel like with this one, it was probably the sixth or seventh cut where it really, boom,
yeah,
settled into place.
it didn't get there early, this one, did it? It was like the early cuts just felt like whereas the dry, I think, maybe came together a bit quicker.
Yeah, yeah.
But we share an office together, and we've got a little screening room there, and we'd invite a few friends over and have a look at it, have a screening. It's interesting though, because audiences aren't all the same. So this is the problem. Some audiences like things to be really spelt out, and other people like it to be really oblique, and so you're trying to find a point where you can you keep in a film like this, which is a cryptic puzzle, can you keep everyone happy? But I think we found I think it's landed in a really great place. I think the screenings that we've been having in the US since we've been here have kind of shown audiences really enjoying that. And audiences are very literate in this genre now from television.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. And Eric, because of how reflective and deep thinking Aaron is, did it require any more on your part to maintain the fluidity of Aaron across the timelines? So, in other words, did you need to meet with Archie Thompson, who plays the younger Aaron, to create a consistent thought process of the character, or was all that you needed to navigate Aaron's headspace exist on the page and in Robert's direction and vision?
Yeah, it really came down to the material on the page. And as far as Archie was concerned, we're blessed to have an old friend of ours, Jeremy Lindsay Taylor, who's the actor who plays the father, who's just great with young actors, and he's a great almost like a little acting coach, isn't he?
That's what he was like on
He's
set.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So Archie was really, really sort of shepherded along by Jeremy, and I don't like to get in the way of the young, or never underestimate them. So there was more than enough for me. I think for Rob and I was just that calibration of, well, how much do you lean into what the audience is being informed by with the flashbacks, and how much do you not? But because at the same time, you're never really sure when you're shooting exactly where those flashbacks are going to appear until, deep into the edit. So
Mm.
just trying to calibrate it, and then just go with what's true to him. What does he know, and will the audience pick up on that or not? You can't always control that as well. You think you're emoting something, but some of it will be picked up and some of it won't.
Do you have a preference on the doing scenes that involve the power of words? Because there's a lot of times, like when your character is talking to the young ladies, and there's so many moments that I was like writing, oh, that was a good line that you could almost stitch on a pillow. And then there was moments like we were just talking about where you feel like there's so much history to him, like he's been through so much, there's so much going on up there, and we get a bit, as we've been talking about here with these past two films, we get some insight into that, but not the totality of it. But I feel like you captured that totality with your eyes. And so I'm just curious if you have a preference on doing scenes that, involve the power of words, or getting scenes where you get to, creatively flex through no words at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, but both parts are fun. I always feel like never underestimate the power of listening.
Mm,
I love scenes where I don't talk. I mean, I love them, and so if and also for Aaron, it's like, as an investigator, like, you do a lot of listening. Like, you're trying to get people to talk, and when they talk, you better shut up, like, so always just leaning into that as well. I think, that there's power in the silence. And you always hope that you're working with directors that are able to frame things in such a way that they're going to pick up on those nuances, and sometimes it might be a tighter lens or whatever. But yeah, I really enjoy listening as an actor, particularly when you're opposite great actors and they're doing something interesting and giving you something to work with.
yeah. Should you get the opportunity to make another one, and I hope you do, what's your greatest hope for Aaron going forward?
Do you know what? I really felt like this film had to work standalone, not only as a film, but as an ending for Aaron, in case we
Sure.
don't, because we didn't even know what the third one was. Third one hadn't been released while we were making this. So it wasn't like we could look towards a third. We just were always very clear that we had to come up with an ending that felt complete
Mm,
as an emotional beat for Aaron, so that, fans of the series or fans of the book would feel okay. So we applied the same rigor with the second one as we did with the first. Like, what's the best cinematic version of this great premise, and how can we leave in a way that feels somewhat complete?